Thanks again for coming. I'm going to introduce my panel. Everybody is we're all on first name basis, so I'm going to introduce. We have Anders from Ericsson, Mark from Mobile Ecosystem, Ming-Chi from Qualcomm, Kari from T-Mobile, and Jacob from the Wi-Fi Alliance. Let me just start off by asking everybody what they do for the organization, how it relates to our panel today.
Okay, so my name is Anders Svensson. I work for Ericsson, and I'm a principal solution manager, and my main focus is 5G in general, where unlicensed spectrum is one part of what we were supporting 5G. So that's the reason why I'm here.
Mark Lowenstein, I'm a longtime industry analyst. I run my own firm, Mobile Ecosystem. I think this is my 20-something plus CTIA, so it's a privilege to be here and talk about unlicensed. And I've been a broad-based consultant to the mobile space since the early 90s.
And my name is Ming-Chi Fan. I'm with Qualcomm, specifically with the Qualcomm research. And presently in the company, I'm driving R&D and key innovations, really in unlicensed band and also in shared spectrum, particularly to see how we can really bring the cellular experience into those bands.
Good afternoon. My name is Kari, and I'm responsible for network technology development and strategy at T-Mobile. And when it comes to technology development, there are a couple of very important kind of guiding principles, if you will, innovation and customer experience. And if you look back in recent years, every meaningful network innovation has been first available in our network. Examples might be, voice over LTE or HD voice, rich communication services, or LTE advanced features such as carrier aggregation, 4x4 MIMO, and 256 QAM. All those are great because it allows us to provide best possible customer experience to our customers so that they can enjoy mobile internet to the fullest. Unlicensed spectrum also provides great opportunities for innovation. Wi-Fi calling worldwide, which is great, is one example, and LTE over unlicensed is another example. And unlicensed spectrum already plays an important role in our business, and we look forward to making good use of it in the future too.
Hi, I'm Jacob Jorgensen. I'm a VP Technology and Engineering for the Wi-Fi Alliance, which is an organization representing over 700 technology firms who are actively involved in the Wi-Fi industry. And currently I'm focusing on providing technology direction to the Alliance and working specifically on a coexistence test plan that involves contributions from dozens of companies from both our Wi-Fi industry and the cellular industry. And we're doing this in the effort to avoid any regulatory intervention. Just a couple of words about Wi-Fi for those who don't know. Wi-Fi has got over 34 billion devices that are going to be shipped that will exist by the year 2020. Over half of all internet traffic is actually carried by Wi-Fi in comparison to maybe 13% as predicted by analysts by 2019, 13% over cellular. We also have a proven track record of compatibility for present Wi-Fi technology being interoperable with earlier versions for the past 10 years. So it's a rich environment that millions and millions of people around the world rely on.
All right, thanks. So how I like to handle it today is the topic is unlicensed spectrum. You might be curious of what can engineers overcome policy concerns. We have a near-term, friction right now of those people who are industry watchers. We'll touch upon that. We're talking about near-term unlicensed spectrum and as well as looking forward to 5G, what can we expect? So given that as an overall topic, we'll have Mark start us with an overview of unlicensed spectrum. Why do we need it now, and how much of it is there, and maybe anything that's released via regulatory bodies?
Sure. So I'll just spend 2 minutes doing a quick overview of where we are with unlicensed. So first of all, it's a lot of spectrum if you add up all of the potential for unlicensed that is going on right now. There's sort of in three families of it, or three areas. One is LTEU and LAA, which we're sort of in the midst of right now, and trying to sort out some of the issues around coexistence with Wi-Fi and cellular. And T-Mobile and Verizon here in North America for LTEU have been the biggest sort of proponents of that, and with some preparations to deploy. And hopefully that'll move forward. We're hoping, by the end of this year that some of those the regulatory issues will be sorted out, and that we could see some commercial deployments. Another basket, extremely exciting and very compelling, and I think which has a lot of attention in the industry, is 3.5 gigahertz, the CBRS, based on the FCC's report and order dating back to April 28th, which unleashes potentially 150 megahertz of spectrum using a shared spectrum, shared bandwidth structure. Lots of opportunities there for business model innovation. You can get really deep into it, the PAL licenses and the GA licenses and all of that, but the bottom line is lots of spectrum available there on a shared basis. And then finally, within the Spectrum Frontiers announcement from the FCC back in July, having to do with 5G, there are provisions in some of the bands for shared access or spectrum sharing, basically, as well as for unlicensed. That's sort of the third basket of unlicensed spectrum opportunities. And to talk a little bit about why we need unlicensed spectrum and why I think it's important, as somebody who's been in the industry and has been following the industry for a long time, first of all, there's no question, given all the growth, we hear all the reports, the VNI from Cisco and Ericsson's reports and so on, the incredible growth of traffic on the network, about 50% growth per year, probably accelerate that even more with the growth of video. And it's a bit of a challenge for the carriers, with CapEx and with spectrum auctions and so on, to be shouldering all of that in terms of the deployments. And so I think some alternatives to how we add more capacity that we can all take advantage of in ways where you might not have to pay necessarily billions of dollars for spectrum, where we are right now with 600 megahertz auctions. That's one compelling aspect. Another compelling aspect, I think, is that there's an opportunity for some new entrants. We've got 4 major carriers right now in the U.S. that have been around for a long time. They're doing a great job serving 300 plus million subscribers, but I think that there's also an opportunity. There are folks in the unlicensed area in Wi-Fi. There's folks like Google and other internet players. And just opportunity for some new entrants and more competition in the aggregate of mobile and broadband, I think, would be great. And I think what's also potentially exciting, particularly around 3.5, is the opportunity for some business model innovation. And if we can pull off CBRS in the way that the FCC is envisioned, and they've been wanting to do shared spectrum for a long time, this could be an area where the U.S. really leads the world, like we have with LTE, really, and like we're poised to do with 5G. But 3.5 could lay a lot of the foundations for 5G in that context, and that's very exciting. And then finally, I think some of these schemes for unlicensed, and again, particularly in 3.5 and then what we've envisioned in 5G, but 3.5 to begin with, could help kickstart the small cell market, particularly in building, because we're nowhere near where we thought we would be with in-building small cells and in-building coverage at this point, late 2016, in part just because of the cost and the business models, where we really could use the prospects for a neutral host, which is one of the aspects that's envisioned for 3.5G. So I just think there's lots of opportunities for more spectrum and some business model innovation, and so hopefully that lays the sort of foundation for the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So let me follow up on that. Does anybody have any commentary on that 3.5 and what they think it's going to be used for? And then any thoughts on what the spectrum bands are specifically that are targeted unlicensed for 5G? How about you, Ming-Chi?
So I think clearly, from Mark has given a very good overall, key summary for really unlicensed band. And also, one thing about 3.5 is we really view this as a shared spectrum, right? It's really a band that's a little bit different from 5 gigahertz uniband or the ISM bands, in the sense that in the unibands, everybody going there really have what I would call the horizontal type of sharing, where every individual basically are really listen before talk and try to share on an equal basis. And then what happens is in 3.5 gigahertz, you also have this sharing called a vertical sharing, where you actually have incumbents there really have priority. And the question really is how you can really get in the band to together work with incumbents and also be able to yield to incumbents when they're there, and otherwise to be able to operate. So that's a model that basically will be opening up, I think, a lot of other type of shared spectrum. And the one thing in particular, basically, we are glad to see is the recent NPRM coming from FCC that released the high bands for 5G, right? 28 gigahertz and above. Over there, basically, you also can see the 2 types of spectrum there. There is basically the 64 to 71 gigahertz. That's really more or less like unlicensed band. And also there's a 37 to 37.6, that gigahertz band. That's really it's kind of a shared spectrum, similar to 3.5, but really having any incumbents there. So I think really with these possibility of bands, it really opens up the landscape of us to really innovate, give the best consumer experience going in there by both working, sharing in a vertical manner and in a horizontal manner, and thereby at the end, the consumer really wins there.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody want to add any more?
Yeah, I may add to that something. So if you look at the FCC's Spectrum Frontiers NPRM, it's awesome that they brought so much spectrum to our industry, about 11 gigahertz in total. So that's a lot of spectrum. But when you look at it in detail, majority of that is unlicensed. So 7 gigahertz, the 64 to 71, is unlicensed spectrum, and that combined with the band that's right below it, kind of makes it a contiguous 14 gigahertz of unlicensed spectrum in the millimeter wave area. That's great for 5G deployment. So in the future, I think when you kind of look at the ratio between licensed and unlicensed in today's frequency bands, it's roughly in balance. But when you look at those bands that are kind of envisioned for 5G, suddenly there's much more unlicensed spectrum than there is licensed spectrum. So that kind of speaks for unlicensed spectrum, and these shared spectrum scenarios becoming more important in the future. And obviously for us to be ready for that when that time comes, you kind of have to start working on it already today.
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
I'd like to add, I think the unlicensed spectrum is going to play a key role in 5G and also for Wi-Fi. I think a key concern is the fair sharing of that unlicensed spectrum, and that the sharing of that spectrum will be done in a manner that is fair to all users. And that is something we're focused on. We're committed to developing our coexistence test plan, which will allow the industry itself to regulate how it treats other users in the unlicensed band. And I think that might be a good model going forward in the other bands.
Yeah, so Jacob brought up the point that, that we are in the period where I think the industry is trying to work together. The Wi-Fi guys and the mobile carrier guys have a similar desire to have a fair sharing approach. There's a little bump in the road. And so when we address that, if we can have a discussion of where we are, maybe Jacob first and maybe Anders can jump in to see different perspectives on where we are and when solutions are anticipated.
So the industry came together, over the past year and decided that it would work together to find a common industry solution, which the FCC was very happy about. And the Wi-Fi Alliance was sort of agreed upon as the venue and the agency that would provide the test plan solution with the input of all participants on both sides. So we've been working very diligently on that test plan with the involvement and participation from all members, both sides. And we expect to release that test plan by the end of this month, approximately September 21st.
Thanks. And
Yeah, so from an Ericsson perspective, we have been part of the discussions there with Wi-Fi Alliance, and we have also provided contributions in order to our view. Our view is that the sharing should be on a fair ground, that we should, then LTU should not impact on deployment in a certain geographic area more than what another Wi-Fi deployment would be, and that's where the discussion have been on how to measure that and so on.
Right.
I think we all hope that we should be able to come to a resolution on that.
Right.
yeah, Ming-Chi?
Yeah, and so one thing I would really want to highlight is clearly, I think having the fair sharing happen is a principle that has been designed into LTU and LAA from day one. That's very important. And clearly, to make that happen, there needs to be hooks, from basically spec and feature perspective. There also needs to be a process that's industry coming together. So clearly, we as Qualcomm is working very actively with the Wi-Fi Alliance, and we have been participating basically in the validation of test plan, bring our equipment into WFA lab and really do the testing to verify the lab, to verify the test plan. And also right now we're participating in the PlugFest type of the process. So very actively try to support that. So that one for LTU, I think we definitely hope that we, from industry-wise, we can come together and have a test plan to be released. The other one I want to highlight is also in addition to LTU, LAA, that's really happening in 3GPP, is already kind of industry global standards process that everyone's really coming together. And I think right now is basically the LAA technical spec for 3GPP R13 has completed. And right now what's been happening is also there is the test plan in the RAN 4 that's been developed, right? Part of the test is really for minimum performance, like MPS. But the one very important component of that for LAA that's happening in 3GPP is also happening for coexistence. So some kind of multi-node coexistence test between LAA and the Wi-Fi is currently being developed in 3GPP as we speak, and hopefully that will come out to be really the test standard also for LAA and Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so me as an industry observer, I think this is foundational, this cooperation, and essential for the future, and how fast 5G can roll out. So that this fair sharing or whatever mechanism and all the cooperation is foundational for the future. And so as we go into unlicensed, what's kind of the use case for an operator like T-Mobile? So if you can, I don't want you to represent everybody, but what are your thoughts on that, Kari?
I mean, absolutely. So unlicensed spectrum and unlicensed technologies play a very important role in our operations and have for quite some time already. We've supported Wi-Fi calling, for example, already since 2007. We've had that innovation in place for a long, long time. We provide cell spot routers to our customers if they need improved coverage at home that supports Wi-Fi as well. We've worked very hard on developing capabilities to bring LTE into the unlicensed space as well. We work together with Wi-Fi Alliance on coexistence test specification. We firmly believe in fair sharing and kind of everyone having equal access to that spectrum, which is absolutely necessary. I do want to say, though, that I think from our standpoint, the progress has been slow and could have been faster, and hopefully we finally get to a point where we can kind of put that behind us and then just move on and let different technologies use unlicensed spectrum like it was originally envisioned to be. And that's the kind of great part of it. But really, for us, it goes back to improved experience, more capacity, better speed, better coverage, enriched capabilities. And that's sort of what unlicensed spectrum provides to us, and you can kind of build a business case based on that.
So from I guess the Wi-Fi Alliance, you have to be a neutral host, a neutral party for many members. But you have a perspective, Jacob, on I guess, the cable guys who use it and others who have a vested interest on it, cable guys simply because they have a business model using unlicensed spectrum. As you look forward to, in the near term and in the future, I'll call 5G spectrum, what are your thoughts on Wi-Fi as we look towards the future with new spectrum and such?
Well, first of all, I want to repeat the point you made that we have to be fair in our role in developing the test plan and consider everyone's interests, not only Wi-Fi, but also on the cellular side. We need to also ensure that users of Wi-Fi who might not fit the classic use case are also taken into account. So indoor users who operate at very low signal levels, as an example. In the future, we see that there's going to be a significant number of shipments of dual and triple band devices in the unlicensed area. And we expect that we're going to see a real explosion of use in the unlicensed bands, both by Wi-Fi technology companies and by the cellular world. So we are very interested in making sure that the coexistence is in effect so that both sides can grow without any impediment or delay.
And I think I was at the Ericsson booth yesterday, and Anders was showing off some, I guess, introduced equipment that has both capabilities already. So the infrastructure community is already geared up for this.
Yeah, so naturally from a fair sharing perspective, it gets more and more important the more utilization you have of the spectrum, and that makes it more and more important when it comes to finding methods to make sure that regardless which technology you use, you actually leverage your fair share of the spectrum. And then we need to find the methods in order to kind of validate that, and that's, I guess, that's what we're doing in our process that we're doing. And to Kari's point, it had taken a little bit longer time than what we expected. Naturally, now the first time it might be a little bit more challenging. Hopefully in the future we can find a process that is much more faster to get to the market with new technologies.
So going on to the question of this, this panel, can engineers overcome policy concerns? So I'll throw it to Mark. What are the policy concerns, and is that still valid?
So when you say the policy concerns across unlicensed, or particularly for one?
In relation to unlicensed and multiple bodies trying to use that.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of these initiatives, and several of them are being sort of facilitated by the regulatory folks at the FCC. Have been very progressive, particularly with 3.5 and 5G, and so there's a real desire to get those forward. And in fact, if you look at 3.5. Some of the work, the foundational work that's being done even now in LTEU in terms of how spectrum, well, how we're going to have this fair sharing. In 3.5, we're going to have the SASs and the environmental sensing networks to make sure that folks who are the incumbent users on 3.5 are protected. And I would imagine that the same sorts of things will be required in 5 gig. Mm-hmm. So, clearly there's a desire to find a balance between speed to market and all these great opportunities, but at the same time making sure that it happens in a way that protects incumbent users and provides a reasonable user experience, and also facilitates the opportunity for new entrants into the marketplace and business model innovation. So there's sort of a fair bit that has been taken on the regulatory side for this. A lot on the plate if you sort of think about sort of the history of this industry. So it's exciting, but there's also a lot of new technology that's being developed to be able to adjudicate how this spectrum, which is a limited resource and getting more crowded, is shared between the multiple parties, both on an unlicensed and licensed basis.
Okay, thanks. So this is those people who come here maybe are expecting technical things. So this is, can engineers overcome policy concerns? So we have engineers here. So I'll throw it to Ming-Chi first. What are the technology answers, and everybody else can follow on what's going on now, what's going on with 5G?
Sure. I think from perspective of how to really allow fair share and the coexistence really happen, I think first of all the fundamental thing is anyone I think who deploys a technology in the unlicensed band really have the key motivation to make sure the interference is as minimized as possible. So that one actually builds the basis for fair sharing, in my mind, coming forward, right? So now, if we look at that, is the techniques really to really allow you to fair share really is a few classes. The first class of mechanism is really kind of interference avoidance, basically. You go into a particular band, you try to sense the band to see whether the band is already being occupied. And you try to basically find, if it's occupied, you try to find a different band, right? So in this particular cases, you always try to find a channel that you see the least interference, and thereby you produce the least interference to others as well. So that's really something that's basics going in there. Now, of course, in the event of in a place, in a hospital like this, when things are very crowded, then basically you may also have to occupy the same channel with other technologies at the same time, right? Then where you go in there, basically the mechanism we have to perform is basically by doing listen before talk. So everyone kind of really take turns. So you have to sense the spectrum. CSMA is basically one way of doing listen before talk. And right now, I think 3GPP LAE has adopted a listen before talk approach with the timelines very well aligned with CSMA, given Wi-Fi is kind of the incumbent in that particular band at the current moment. But in the future, there can be other type of listen before talks that can even be more efficient, right? And have less overhead in kind of coming together and enhance, then thereby produce better spectral efficiency. So that angle, I think, is very important. So technology-wise, we do listen before talk in the code channel. And also, but even before that, we always try to find a channel that's least occupied. Now, the third thing that's very important is, I think, our side of the angle for technology is really how the ecosystem is worked together and how the technology is being developed as a process in moving forward. So let's take LTE in unlicensed, for example, right? And gradually similar thing will happen in 5G is the first thing that we looked at LTE and license, okay, from an engineering perspective, what makes sense to bring the technology to market in a gradual perspective, right? So the technology that the consumer gets in the hands can be mature as things grow. So that's why we started to look at LTU, which is really just downlink only, right? Doesn't require any uplinks, downlink only, going to unlicensed band. So, and can reuse most of the 3GPP release 11, 12 spec. That's really there. Then the next step is look at, okay, now, if my downlink only can work, then let's work at TDD type of mechanism, but still it's a secondary cell such that data only transmit in unlicensed band, but the control still goes on licensed band. So you do the carrier aggregation between licensed and unlicensed, but now you have both uplink and downlink in the unlicensed band. So that's really LAA. And the third step is what's currently being discussed in industry, but many of you have heard, is a multifier, right? So that's the technology where now the control channel, we also can operate in the unlicensed band, and therefore technology based on LTE can operate in an unlicensed band in a standalone manner with control and data all coming together. So that's really a process that we really start to see. And through the process, clearly, industry collaboration is very important. So we try to really work together with open standards bodies to make sure these technologies are being standardized, joined together, right? And both in 3GPP and right now in the case of multifier, it's really happening in Multifier Alliance. And the technology that we develop basically can work in 5 gigahertz uniband in sharing with Wi-Fi, but also can work even more efficiently, like Mark said, in new type of spectrum, like 3.5 gigahertz, the tier 3 GAA tier, where there's really no legacy there, and then you can really go into the band and operate in a more efficient manner. So that's really how we can see we develop technology, and at the end, okay, one thing I also want to highlight is from Qualcomm perspective, we are also a big supporter of Wi-Fi, right? So we participate in the Wi-Fi 802.11 AC and AX standardization. And we see that really one thing that we're happy to see is with the introduction of LTU and LAA, actually I think the Wi-Fi evolution also has speeded up. So there's a lot of and new good technology elements added into 11AX. So I think at the end, from consumer perspective, with basically the technology try to compete and deliver the best type of solution, at the end, and Qualcomm supporting both, at the end, I think consumer wins, really getting the best experience in the unlicensed band.
That was very technical. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so but to add to that also showed the process that Ming just described is the unlicensed benefit of innovation in that sense that you can now come with new technologies and so on. It's important that the regulator doesn't put too much restrictions on exactly what technology should be used, but rather give it to the industry to figure out how is the most efficient way to use the spectrum. And the regulator said the kind of framework for how it should be used and how the fair sharing should be achieved, but not the technical detail on how it should be actually.
Yeah, I was going to go to Jacob because he might have an opinion.
Well, I absolutely agree that that they're working with the Wi-Fi, working relationship between Wi-Fi and cellular is important to really make the best use of the unlicensed frequencies, and they're great business cases. I think that part of the coexistence solution for us needs to pay also close attention to the fact that I think by the end of 2017 it's predicted over $550 billion of value of economic value will be attributed to Wi-Fi. So there's a very large present usage of Wi-Fi. And we've been working, the Wi-Fi Alliance has been working with the cellular industry to define fair sharing. And that's been very difficult. It's required compromise from both sides. But we're committed to finishing the test plan and creating the platform for this fair sharing going forward. I think that part of the difficulty is in defining some of the details of the sharing. When we talk about LAA mechanisms, et cetera, one of the problems is there are two different types of technology. Wi-Fi is a completely different technology than cellular. Wi-Fi uses a different technology to sense the presence of another user in the space, preamble detection, which is much more sensitive than energy detection. But that is not used by the cellular industry. So both sides have had to make compromises. What I hope for is in the future, going forward, we can find a common technology solution where we can both agree that it makes sense so we can minimize the amount of compromise that's required for each side. And that would be true in any of the bands.
So let me follow up on that. So how does that work in terms of, is it, because you have IETF, you have the, who are, did I get the wrong standards? But you got 3GPP. So how does that happen in terms of making sure it doesn't, it goes smoothly as opposed to, all this friction right now?
You mean in the future?
Yeah.
Well, I'm
5G.
hoping that 3GPP will welcome input and involvement in an equal way from the Wi-Fi industry in creating the standards for coexistence in the future.
Yeah, so clearly, I think one good point that has been made by Jacob is it's definitely good for one technology to move forward. And one thing is to follow up on point from Mark is for any type of new unlicensed shared spectrum, we view the 5G, new radio shared spectrum may be one key candidate for that particular band, which I think right now 3GPP, as probably everyone someone probably have seen, is in the past meeting there has been study item proposal to bring in a standalone, unlicensed operating type of technology for 5G and operating in unlicensed band. Actually, LAA type is already the de facto, supported by both cellular industry and also participants in WFA from both. And now even the standalone unlicensed, that particular study item in the last meeting, actually have support from, for example, cable industries, as well as from key operators in cellular industry. So this is really a work that's really happening from industry momentum perspective in 3GPP. And then coming back to really the fair sharing point, in the process of WFA that we have learned, one thing that's very interesting to us really is, I think the commercial product, even from a Wi-Fi perspective, one of the key challenges there is from a Wi-Fi perspective, because each of the product is really being made to be targeted in different type of scenario of operation. Some are for enterprise, some are for homes, and therefore each one of them may even have a different type of mechanism for coexistence, even though the spec is common, but a lot of detailed parameters may actually differ. So one of the key challenges that we encountered is really how to really be able to achieve kind of a very good baseline across the Wi-Fi access points and sharing. Of course, we are working very hard with WFA on top of that, really try to find a common solution that is there. But that tells us the nature that really from fair sharing perspective, even the same category of product type of family, even the Wi-Fi today, there's really a lot of variability kind of in place, but that's really understandable from industry perspective. And clearly in the future, we're definitely hoping that in a clean slate type of spectrum, starting with 3.5 gigahertz and going to high bands or other type of shared spectrum, we could actually make a more efficient coexistence to happen.
Okay.
And I do want to add that, these bands that I used for Wi-Fi and LTE, for example, they're already governed by, Part 15 rules that basically sets the foundation on how you can operate within those bands. And as long as you comply with those rules, that should be the starting point for it. And it's worked well for us in the past by enabling innovation and allowing technologies like Wi-Fi flourish, which is awesome. I'd be careful in creating additional governance mechanisms on top of that for potentially unnecessary reasons, because that could slow down progress and stifle innovation, which definitely we want to avoid.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you're going to have to keep
So
that.
let me follow up because Kari mentioned innovation as a key driver for what we're going to see on license. So just the panel, aside from the technical innovations that we've already heard, I guess how does it make it real for the consumer? Do we have a vision of what innovation will look like in this 5G unlicensed space / licensed space? So I'll throw it to Kari because you brought the innovation word out first.
Yeah, I mean 5G is all about innovation, and this is not necessarily specific to licensed or unlicensed spectrum. It's maybe more about the technology itself, and it's different from maybe previous generations in a sense that it's designed to meet the requirements and needs of the next decade and even beyond, some of which we know and some of which we don't know. And it's really expanding mobile technologies or the scope of mobile technologies to cover a broader range of use cases and new innovations. So can I exactly give you a list from A to Z what those are? No, but I can give you some examples that definitely kind of are related to that, maybe mobile virtual reality or augmented reality, high definition mobile video. Those are kind of all capabilities that 5G will enable. And then of course there's the other kind of end of the spectrum when it comes to maybe expanding wireless technologies to more in the industrial space, or maybe also to kind of maybe help serve homes better. So there are multiple different use cases that it's going to be good for, and spectrum obviously is the enabler for this, and whether that's unlicensed or licensed doesn't really matter. You have to make good use of all those different spectrum assets so that you can kind of make the most out of 5G in the future.
Okay, Mark, you were championing a bit there.
Yeah, so getting this back to unlicensed, the licensed versus unlicensed for a moment, I think once we get through some of the fair sharing and discussions, and hoping that we will this year, and providing the template for some of these innovative new services, I think one of the next phases of this is when we're going to start to see devices introduced that take advantage of these new capabilities. And one thing that's for sure is that these devices are going to be toggling much more actively between licensed and unlicensed. And if you look at some of the work that T-Mobile has done, some of the pioneering work, as you move from a Wi-Fi environment to a cellular or an LTE environment to make sure that a call is held and there's some sort of seamless, it's not always perfect, but it's gotten, you go back to 2007 and think about the user experience today, has made remarkable progress. We're going to have to get even further along on that standpoint, because if you think about some of the Wi-Fi first or Wi-Fi centric cellular services that have been introduced, and some of the early cable efforts, when you think about the cable Wi-Fi group and some of the hotspots that they've deployed for outdoor use that leverages on their Wi-Fi and broadband efforts, there's still some hard yards to be done there in terms of what the user experience is like from a device standpoint, in terms of how you actively and dynamically switch between those environments. And so I think that there's, that's one area that I think is sort of an important next phase of this work between licensed and unlicensed.
I'll throw it to Anders.
Yeah, so naturally it is a mix, and like we talked a little bit in the beginning as well, unlicensed getting more important because we get more spectrum there, but at the same time we need to make sure that we still have licensed spectrum because you have more predictability in how you can use it, what the services will be, and so on. So they complement each other, and like you say, they will switch between the two different technologies much faster in the future and more seamlessly in the future in order to enable the capacity needs in the locations where you want. The other piece that we talked a little bit about is that putting restrictions or guidelines, rules on how to do coexistence now, when we don't know what the technology will be the next 10 years, would be very difficult to change later on. So I think it's better that we work in the industry to figure out that coexistence, set the guidelines ourselves rather than have the regulator set rules for how the spectrum should be actually done in the details.
Yeah, we absolutely agree with that statement. Industry should be deciding this.
So that's the answer to the question of the panel. Can engineers overcome policy concerns? And I think it's overwhelmingly yes. So with that, we're doing our Q&A period. We have a roving microphone there. Questions? Wow, okay. Here's a question. Oh, okay.
Yeah, hi, how you doing? My question is more around the implementation of unlicensed LTE. Do you see this as a device that's installed by a third party and connects via IP to the networks, or is it a fully controlled operator device?
Well, so one question, I guess I can take that question first. So I guess the question about the device for LTE unlicensed, I think that depends on what kind of technology you're talking about. If you're talking about LAA type, which you have license assisted access, then this is basically will be a device that's based on LTE carrier aggregation. And except the bands that you aggregate will be unlicensed band. So from that perspective, clearly it's a technology that the carrier will be deploying. So that's really the basis. So you really have the same kind of RF. So basically you have the RF band extending to really the unlicensed band aggregated with license. But of course, if you talk about a technology like multi-fire, which is really a standalone type of the operation, the baseband will still be kind of a multi-mode LTE and multi-fire type of the baseband. RF-wise, it may be operating in like 3.5 gigahertz that we really have. It's a new standalone type of shared band. And basically, we envision that still a lot of, like today's market, the reality is a lot of device ecosystem will still be based on carrier type of ask and procurement. But in the future, I mean, there could be, if a certain device OEM is willing to do and see certain opportunity, that device can be a standalone as well.
Right. Thank you.
Anybody else want to join that? Or? All right, Ming-Chi. I think there was a question up front.
Hi there. So I think one of the fascinating things about the unlicensed spectrum is, we're sitting here, we're talking to a panel of, a few different groups, but when we talk about innovation, is there concern on the part of the panel that there's a new entrant, an 800-pound gorilla that comes in and assume sort of the role that Wi-Fi did at one point, where there was an unlicensed band, there was a need, and Wi-Fi filled it. Maybe there's another party out there that comes in and is not sitting in on these conversations that you all have, as you're trying amongst yourselves to sort of arbitrate this fair use, and yet it's unlicensed. There's no reason a third party couldn't come in and just saturate it with their own new protocol that might be better, might be more adoptable. Is there any discussion or concern about that?
Yeah, from our standpoint, I mean, it's called unlicensed for a reason. It's not Wi-Fi spectrum or LTE spectrum. It's unlicensed spectrum, and there are already multiple different technologies using it, from baby monitors to garage door openers to Wi-Fi. So there's already kind of multiple users there, and that's the beauty of it, and that's what it's designed for. So absolutely, if that happens, then great. As long as you play by the rules, it's a non-issue.
Anybody else wants to join on that one? Okay. Other questions? All right, I have a backup question. So what does it mean from an infrastructure standpoint in terms of hardware, software, in terms of making it real and commercialized to the subscriber base or whatever? Anders, you want?
Yeah, so in what aspect? The technologies are there today. We have Wi-Fi and we have LTE technologies. Naturally, it's similar, like we have deployment. Someone said that small cell might be the most prominent deployment for this, and that's how we see it as well. And indoor will be an important part of it when it comes to LTE, both LAA, LTU, and multifier. So I think it's a similar way that we deploy Wi-Fi to some extent today, and or have done, but now we can use it for another technology in a more efficient way, or in another way over the air, and leverage the unlicensed band in combination with the licensed band.
Yeah, and as one broad, I'll put my analyst hat on for a minute. So one broad policy issue that we have to think a little bit about is, as the industry is trying to work through some of these issues, like we're working through and discussed almost painfully on this panel, it's important because at the same time, the carriers are trying to make decisions about what their CapEx spend is going to look like and what their deployments plans are going to look like. The device OEMs, who need a good 9 months to a year lead time on making some decisions about their roadmaps to support some of these services, whether it's LAA or 3.5 and so on. So if you think about, the iPhone 8, those decisions in terms of support for different bands and so on, those need to be made soon and with the right lead time. So whatever we're accomplishing in the industry and 3GPP and so on, we've got to send a positive enough signal to the OEM community that we're working through this stuff and it's going to happen, so they can work this into their roadmaps and we get these services out into the consumer market.
Do you have any opinion? Since you are a Qualcomm is heavily invested in that side.
Yeah, we clearly, I think it's a very important point, from Mark. I think from device ecosystem perspective, that's really why all the industry really have to work together to make this to be a broader ecosystem. And so that's really the device vendors, OEM, really sees the momentum to really be able to plan the roadmap and features in the ahead of time. And the other thing about the infrastructure is, I think, coming to what Anders mentioned, I think clearly we are very, we agree with the view. Basically, what happens to the small cell infrastructure is basically, if it's LAA or LTU, basically that infrastructure can really just be based on LTE small cell self, with basically a slight modification to the RF to include the unlicensed band and some potentially the software upgrades to do that. And then even if the small cell, for example, is multi-fire, I think from infra perspective, of course, depending on implementation, I think software upgrades are possible as well. Now, one thing that's very important from an infra perspective is having a technology, for example, like multi-fire, they can operate standalone in the unlicensed band, provides even convenience to carriers like T-Mobile to be able to deploy small cells indoors, because the fact that, for example, using 3.5 gigahertz as a standalone band. This really eases the needs to coordinate with any frequencies that's used by, by other sites in macro cells. And at the same time, by having listen before talk, right? Then basically it's a mechanism you can drop in there, and the different boxes will not require strict synchronization with one another. So that really further alleviates one of the key challenges that small cell is facing today. So, and very naturally, very interestingly, if you look at some of the proposals and designs coming to 5G frame, the structure and the frame structure for 5G actually very naturally incorporate some of this dynamic type of nature we even learned from LBT doing listen before talk in LAA into 5G, while at the same time try to make sure the service is still reliable. So it's not any type of ad hoc service, but how do you make things can be dynamic with type of LBT type of nature, can switch dynamically between uplink and downlink, and yet still make the link to be reliable. So that's really something we learned kind of from LAA and multi-fire that can really benefit 5G and new radio and shared spectrum in moving forward and make the infra deployment to be easier for carriers as well.
Yeah, so I want your opinion, Jacob, on what it may impact on existing and future product sets for the Wi-Fi community.
Well,
Conceptually.
yeah, so we can't speak for our member companies, but I know they're hard at work at those things. I think one thing that we're really paying close attention to is some of the infrastructure areas that need to be expanded. I don't want to go into the details, but that work is ongoing.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let me throw it back to the audience. Last chance. Everybody wants to have their lunch.
Yeah,
All right.
Over here.
Oh,
There's a
one
question
there.
over there. Yeah.
it's blinding light here.
I just heard Mr. Fang must be, you made a comment that you just discovered that we do not need a very strict synchronization, which relax a lot of technical requirement. Can you elaborate on that? Why don't we need such a strict synchronization? Is that what you said?
Okay, so your comment is really about for synchronization for cellular type of deployment. So one example I can give is, for example, coming back to 3.5 gigahertz, right? If you have if you're in a given common area, so let's say in 3.5 gigahertz, that's really it's from in US it's from 3.55 to 3.7 gigahertz, right? So 150, the total bandwidth. And the basic units is really coming down to 10 megahertz. Of course, if you really get squeezed, you can go down to 5 megahertz chunks. So let's say if you have different LTE, TDD type of operators, right, or operating entities in a common area, right, and the way that really these different chunks of LTE, TDD to be allocated there is each one really will have to occupy a dedicated band, right? One person take band A, the first part, second part, third part. Now, between these adjacent bands, okay, between these bands, in order to really avoid interferences kind of across from uplink to downlink and leakage, right, particularly, really the TDD configuration right now, which has been discussed in the WIN forum, is really have to be very well aligned across the different bands. So that means everybody who operate in a similar given area, you need operating with a fixed set of configuration and a timing alignment, right? Otherwise, interference start to happen, right? So that one, and that's very similar to also to how Japan is doing type of deployment, basically in band 41, where you have 3 operators there, but every operator is doing TDD, but with strictly time alignment and synchronization. But now imagine if you have listen before talk type of technology there from multi-fire. Of course, the air interface still have to be based on LTE for reliability and other things. But let's say if you can do kind of go into the band, start to listen to the band and transmit, then very largely in this case, by doing this LBT, the need for different operating entities across bands to strictly align the configuration goes away. Just like today, how Wi-Fi, when operating 5 gigahertz, you don't need that. But of course, now if you have the LTE type of air interface, you go into that particular band, you really start to be able to deploy the technology more or less in an ad hoc manner, but still based on LTE interface. You will be allowed the end user to really be able to enjoy the QoS and reliability and the range and the capacity, while at the same time making deployment to be more flexible and easy.
Thank you.
All right. Any more? Okay. With that, thank you very much for coming, and on behalf of the panel, thanks again, and goodbye. Have a nice lunch.